Hello and welcome to the first impressions edition of the Colts Cover-2 Podcast. I am Joel A. Erickson. I am joined, as always, by Nate Atkins. We are back at the hotel in Appleton, not in Green Bay. It's very hard to stay in Green Bay for a Packers game, because Green Bay is not very large unless it's a Packers Sunday. You guys don't care about that, though. What you care about is that the fact that the Colts lost 16-10 and the game was much worse than that final score indicates. We're going to have some trouble with some of these categories, guys. It's just really going to be a rough one. One of those games where I'm kicking myself for coming up with all the categories. I think the big thing here, Nate, is this is a game that when you saw it on the schedule, you thought that's a really hard game to win. Especially with the stuff they didn't do in the secondary this year, because it's the Packers' home opener. They have Jordan Love. They have a fleet of 6 wide receivers that are really good. And, it just looked like a hard game to win from that standpoint. And then last week, Jordan Love gets hurt, and suddenly it's Malik Willis, who is not a good quarterback. The Packers don't even think he's a good quarterback. We'll get to that point here in a little bit. But just – you got to win this game. You have to win this game.
You have to win this game. Have to win it when you're down. You're 0-1 to start, and we know this team loses openers, but they often find a way to bounce back. Last year they did it. Week 2 went on the road against the Texans, and they found a way to win that game. This year it was tailor-made for them. It's interesting because the way this podcast has gone for kind of the entire offseason, we banged the drum on the secondary, and we talked about the dangers of running it back the way they did, how there was injury risk. But the main thing was that one point we kept making was that they're not scheduled to face the same slate of passers they did last year, where a lot of times last year their method of being young in the secondary survived because they faced backup quarterbacks who didn't have experience, who weren't very good down the field, and they got the job done to their credit. And the idea was this year, you're not going to have nearly as many of those unless a bunch of guys get hurt. Well, here they go. In week 2, Jordan Love is hurt, and his team is rolling with a backup quarterback that they traded for 3 weeks ago. They gave up a 7th-round pick to the Titans to get Malik Willis, who so far has been a very run-centric quarterback. He'd never thrown a touchdown pass in 3 starts in the NFL. And the Packers are subbing him into a playbook that he's been in there for 3 weeks. And the way that the Colts have built their pass rush, the criticism I had for it was that I thought high-level quarterbacks would be the Achilles heel because they can get away from the pass rush. They can throw quick. They're not going to hold the ball and be scared. That's what I thought would be the Achilles heel. But I thought they were set up to pound the bad quarterbacks the way they did Aiden O'Connell last year, Mitchell Trubisky. Like when they got a matchup like that last year, they would take advantage of it. There were a couple they didn't against Jake Browning and Taylor Heineke, but for the most part, they rose above in those moments. And this year, this week, I should say, was right there for the making. And there's other parts of this game I thought were very much in their favor that we'll get into in the categories. But it's like even the way it played out, there was nothing that played out in this game that made me think we read the matchup wrong or someone just went off, and you just have to tip your cap and say, this guy carried them despite what was going on. The Packers scored 16 points, and the Colts couldn't beat them. And that's really what sums this up. It was a golden opportunity there, and they didn't win, and now this team's 0-2. And, there's a lot they can fix. They have to fix. We'll get into that. But it's one of these things where, you have to start asking yourself, it's one thing for them to lose an opener. It's one thing for them to lose to C.J. Stroud, who is looking great again tonight. Texans passing game that I think is going to put a lot of teams in a bind. But if you can't beat Malik Willis, you have to really start to question kind of what this team's floor and ceiling are. It's one of those games that makes you kind of reevaluate who they actually are.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. I don't really have anything to add to that. We're going to go straight into the categories. We're going to start with villain of the game because the Colts lost. Villain of the game for me, I'll take the easy way out. Gus Bradley. This is the way. So this is the way I kept putting this. You guys might not know this. I have to I have to write one of our previews fairly early in the week, and then we kind of update it as it goes through the week. It's just the best way to get it done. And one of the things I wrote in there, one of the things I said on, I think our podcast midweek, and I also think I said it on TV, was that the Packers were going to look at the tape of the Texans game and be salivating at the way the Colts couldn't defend the edge and edge runs. They were. I was right.
Yep.
They attacked the edges, and for about a half, it looked as bad as you can as an NFL team can look. You kept comparing it in the press box to Alabama versus the Citadel. I kept comparing it to since Wisconsin doesn't look like Wisconsin anymore. I said it was like Wisconsin playing. It was like 5 years ago or 6 years ago when Wisconsin played Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
You just run the ball, can't do anything about it. Like, I know they only scored 10 points in the first half, but part of that is just because Josh Jacobs didn't have good ball security on his way into the end zone. Like, normally you give credit for turnovers here. It's hard to when you're giving up, when you're hemorrhaging yards like this. It could have been 17-0 really fast. And just they went to a 5-man line at the end of the second quarter, kind of got away from it in the third quarter, went back to it later. They did better in the second half, but why didn't you just start in a 5-man line? You're playing Malik Willis.
Yeah.
And, like, just to underscore, I know Malik Willis' stat line looks good today because it's 12 of 14 for 122 and a touchdown. Something like that, right?
Yep.
But just to underscore how much the Packers were afraid to throw the ball, they threw it 5 times in the entire first half. Well, 6 if you kind of play that came back. 2 of those throws in the first half, one of them was a play. 2 of them were like bubble screen things, which most NFL offensive coordinators would tell you are run, like that's a run play to them.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pass, but it's a run play. And then they had the ball with 2 minutes left in the half, an opponent on the ropes, and they didn't even try to score. They didn't even try to give Malik Willis a chance to score. They just sat on the ball for 2 minutes and went to the half. Like, the Packers did not think that Malik Willis could beat them or could beat the Colts. And I don't know, like, we'll talk to Gus Bradley. We'll get a better sense of it. It's hard to know in real time exactly what the system was, but there had to be a better plan. There had to be something better for those edges. 5-man front, something rolled up. I don't know. Like, you cannot let the Packers. The whole point of defensive football. This is where we get on the First Impressions podcast because we start ranting. This is how you can tell it's first impressions. But the whole point of defensive football in the NFL, like Bill Belichick's whole thing was he wanted to make you one-dimensional, so they only had to beat one thing. The Packers entered this game one-dimensional of their own volition.
Yeah.
And the Colts couldn't do a darn thing about it.
Yeah. And that's why I'm saying this is such a gift, is that this is the week that the Colts are without Julian Blackmon. And so they're starting Rodney Thomas at free safety, moving Nick Cross down to strong safety. They're without Juju Brents, which they'll continue to be, but we didn't know what they were going to do. They started Samuel Womack on the outside, a guy who's played in his career half as many defensive snaps as Juju Brents had last year. And the Packers didn't want to go out that very much. They attempted 3 passes beyond 10 yards the entire day. And so it was like this was the week to survive this crazy onslaught of injuries and lacking depth in the secondary. And it's an indictment of the team and Gus Bradley and the entire defensive plan that we're not even talking about guys like Samuel Womack and Rodney Thomas. I don't think they'll come up in any of these categories today. I don't even know how they played, to be honest with you, because they weren't even part of the game plan or the solutions or the problems. The Colts, in one quarter, allowed 164 rushing yards. Maybe I'm stepping on the number of the day. but 164 rushing yards to the Packers in the first quarter is the most that any NFL team has had since the 2011 Broncos, which is my sophomore year in college. That was the Tim Tebow Broncos 13 years ago. Yeah, 13 years ago. And again, like
the Tim Tebow Broncos.
Yes. And especially coming right off last week. Now, I know that the way that the Packers ran was very different than the Texans, who were all 11 personnel, terrify you with the passing, turn your strong safety to an extra free safety, and then pound Joe Mixon up the gut, and do some reverses on top of that. This was more, I give the Packers staff credit because they really came up with a nice way to insulate Malik Willis in this sort of three-headed rushing attack where, they would kind of have motion Jaden Reed around a lot. Obviously, if Josh Jacobs back there, Malik Willis would keep it sometimes, but still, like, you knew that they were going to run the ball. That's all they really had in their bag. And coming off such an alarming performance, that had to be the whole focus in it. And like, it's just strange that they not only did they not find solutions to that, it feels like it got even worse. And I know in the second half, like, the numbers got a lot better. They did play better. Some of that was, like you said, the 5-man front. I think some of it was like they really sold out on that run game, and the Packers got even more conservative with it because they just really didn't want to let Malik Willis lose the game. And they kind of were just bleeding clock in a way where, at least early on in the game, they're more trying to string a script together to actually get into the end zone. But yeah, it's rough. That is a very deserving villain of the game. So I just think there's two very obvious ones in here, unless you want to parse it into different areas. But my villain of the game is Shane Steichen. And I think this is only the second time I've ever made him the villain. If you've listened to this podcast, I'm a big, big fan of Shane. And the reason they brought him here and his ability to work through any kind of issues they've had, be adjustable. But the main reason that Shane is here, and the main reason I was so impressed with him last year, is what Shane has shown in his career is a way to put his quarterback in the right situations to go and win that game and to be at his best. And the whole story with Jalen Hurts was a 52% passer the year before Shane came in. Shane installed a lot of quarterback run that gave Jalen Hurts a lot of ways of getting first downs, touchdowns, without having to do it with an arm that hadn't developed yet. So Shane's second year, I should say, the year that really took off with Jalen Hurts in 2022, they ran him 165 times. He had 760 yards, 13 touchdowns. And a key number to me is 67 first downs with his legs. So that's, for a young quarterback who's developing as a passer, that was 67 first downs that Jalen Hurts didn't have to win in the way that's hard for him at that time, which is as a precision and consistent passer. And today I counted one design run for Anthony Richardson. There might have been a second one. I'm not sure if that fumble, if that's what that was. There were a couple plays where, yes, and this was Shane's argument, yes, the defense, I think one time Anthony made a bad read and handed the ball off when he should have kept it, handed it off to Jonathan Taylor. There were a couple times that the Packers made him hand it off, but that is not a good enough excuse when Jonathan Taylor ran 12 total times in this game. Like, this was not a matter of the defense dictated the ball to go somewhere else. Now, it happened a little bit on RPOs, but you can find a way, if you want to run the ball in this team, to do that. And again, another example of Shane is last year, he got the absolute most out of Gardner Minshew, and he insulated Gardner by keeping him out of situations he's not good at, which is the longer he holds the ball and dealing with pressure. He put him in situations that were very tailor-made to Gardner, which is operating quickly, quick decisions on RPO and precision passing. And it's almost like he went up against a team in the Packers that perfectly understood their quarterback, who's a backup, who's been there 3 weeks and doesn't have nearly as many strengths, I don't think, as Anthony Richardson, but they found ways to get him playing his best and not in situations that are hard for him. And I just don't think Shane did that at all for Anthony Richardson, who had one design run, who dropped back 37 times in this game. And again, I know sometimes those numbers can be skewed because it's like they were down late. But my thing is, they were down because they didn't run. Really, Jonathan Taylor did not play a snap of the fourth quarter today. And that was not a health situation. That was as best as I can read it, because Shane didn't really explain it, I don't think they believed in him in the passing game. He had 2 drops in this game. I still find that not good enough. When the first play of that fourth quarter was the Trey Sermon speed option that lost 4 yards and made it so Matt Gay had to kick a 50-yarder that he missed. So that wasn't a passing play. Also, Trey Sermon hasn't proven anything as a passing down back either. And so there's a reason why people keep bringing up like the game that USC lost to Texas in the national title and the fact that Reggie Bush wasn't on the field for the 4th down play that got stuffed for USC. It isn't that ball had to go to Reggie Bush. It's that you got to get the defense thinking about that. You have to. The whole reason they paid Jonathan Taylor was to make him a central part of the game plan, or at least a threat in the game plan. So to not use him the whole fourth quarter, I just think they put everything on Anthony Richardson down the stretch to win with his arm and without giving him easy completions, because, again, they don't have Josh Downs. That's not their fault. But this was a day to me to bring up Will Mallory and have him do. You've got to scheme some underneath plays that can get Anthony going as a rhythm passer, a guy who doesn't have a lot of that in his career. He was not in a very comfortable, confident space to where when he did drop back to pass and something was slightly off, like a pressure was there, that's when he started sailing passes. Anthony had a really bad game, and I'm not giving him a full excuse for it. A couple of those picks were really, really, really bad. But I just think if you're going to use this quarterback who's in his 6th career start, who's had 18 starts above high school, and who's now a 55% completion quarterback at the NFL level, and you're not going to give him easy completions to boost that. You're not going to let him use his legs, and you're not going to have him hand off to his all-pro running back. I don't know how he's supposed to win with this. You can't just do – last week was awesome that they got the 3 completions of 50-plus yards. That can't be the game plan every week. It just can't. So I just think they asked Anthony Richardson to go be a hero in a game where he didn't need to be a hero. He needed to be a complementary piece to a team that only had to score 20 points to win this game. So I just think this was the worst game I've seen Shane coach so far. And I will say, because I'm a big fan of his, I don't think this will repeat. But it is worth pointing out one of the few times that I think he really struggled, which is today.
Yeah, there was an element of the Packers ran the game plan that the Colts should have ran. Yeah, like when you're going up against a backup quarterback who's probably not great. I feel like I've covered other games where it's just and Shane did this last year against. You brought this up. What was the team he actually did this against last year? It was like, let's just not mess it up. The Panthers, Carolina. There you go. Shane's done it. I know I've seen other coaches do it. Like, just try to force the ball into try to do whatever you have to force it into the other quarterback's hands. Now, my villain of the game didn't help with that particular thing. But when you're ripping off chunks the way Jonathan Taylor was, and with the weapon of Anthony Richardson's legs available, just maybe just do what the Packers did. Just run it until they stop you, rather than putting it in the passing game where they can make mistakes. I've been searching here. We're going to get to hero of the game in a little bit. I don't even know if we're going to be able to get to an unsung hero, but we're going to do a new category today. Backup villain of the game.
Wasn't that the unsung villain?
No. This is different.
Oh, so we got
this is basically two villains, because we need to make sure we have enough villains. I'm probably just going to skip the unsung hero.
I got you.
Backup villain of the game for me, since this is what I wrote about. Chris Ballard. You can't. I could go into this, but I'm gonna keep it simple. You cannot tell us and tell everybody that the defense is going to be fine because the front is so good, and give up 474 rushing yards in the first 2 weeks. Is there even a point in unpacking that?
No, it's pretty self-explanatory. That's why I had you write it this week, because I wrote it last week. Like, you built your team around this, and you made 10 of the 47 game day players, yet again, defensive linemen. This has to be the one thing you're good at. When you pay your linebackers the way you do, they're mostly DeForest Buckner is banged up today, but I'm not sure that would have mattered. It didn't matter against the
But
Texans.
the other thing is that's a good example of it because you've been touting this defensive line. You're giving extensive rundown snaps to Taven Bryan, who cannot play the run, has never been able to play the run. When he was in Cleveland, even when he's in Cleveland, that was the knock on him was he can't play the run. And at a time of Adebawore, who's a pass rusher.
Yeah.
Now, well, I'll get to it here in a little bit. That I don't think the tackle. I do think the tackles played a role in it. They're not like the biggest culprits. I think when I get to unsung villain, I'm probably going to do that. But like these guys you're betting on cannot stop the run, so you shouldn't be surprised when they don't stop the run.
Yeah. No, there's no question. So for the backup villain, since we're kind of tying it into our main villain directly, I'm going to go to.
Well, you could go further out if you want to.
Yeah, no, I don't think I need to. I'm going to go to Michael Pittman Jr. for this. This was a game where the Colts needed to. They got to help their young quarterback out. I know there's been I got some pushback at times because maybe I'm being a little not hard enough on Anthony when I was really hard on Gardner and Carson Wentz. The difference is this kid has not played, and I think that we need to bake in to the expectation of every game that he's going to miss some throws, and he's probably going to have, if he throws enough, he's probably going to have a bad decision that is a turnover-worthy play, at least one. I'm just expecting that every game. That's being a young quarterback. Happens for almost all of them. And so if you're going to have him drop back this much, some guys have to help him out. And so he didn't have Josh Downs. That's just unfortunate. It's nobody's fault. Like I said, I think that'll be a key part of getting his team.
I mean, it's kind of Nick Cross's fault.
Well, that's fair. That's fair. Offensively, that's fair. Offensively, it's not their fault. But Michael Pittman had 7 targets, 3 catches, 21 yards. He had a brutal drop on third down that not only did it lead to a punt, not a first down, but that's how you don't get your quarterback in a rhythm is when he has to punt, get off the field so quickly. And then that run defense comes back out and sits there for 25 plays in a row. And Anthony's cold now. They need to get this kid in a rhythm. They got to step up and help him out. So you have a drop from Pittman. He had 4 other targets he didn't pull in. And he had a play in the end zone that I just didn't really love the effort on trying to get back to that ball. It was a bit of an underthrown ball and good coverage, but so was, I know you've brought this up, so was the one to Romeo Doubs that Jalen Jones was in good position but couldn't finish it. You got to make a better effort. We needed one play where Pittman just, as he's done in the past, go up there and just steal one. You're supposed to be a guy, he prides himself on being a guy that, when it's a 50-50 ball, it's actually 70-30 you. Well, you got to pull in some of those. Get the first down that wasn't a perfectly placed ball. You have a young developing quarterback, but you need to get him to start believing in these plays and seeing them. It's like seeing the ball go through the basket, seeing the ball get completed. And, when you don't have Josh Downs, and again, I wish they would do something different at tight end. I think it's very ironic that they dressed 3 tight ends and 2 of them are blockers, and then they ran the ball 13 times versus 37 dropbacks. Seems a little inefficient to me. But if you're going to do that, you have no intermediate targets except Michael Pittman. He's got to be that for this quarterback right now. He just has to be. And it wasn't. And so it's Richardson did not play well. But I think he had 2 teammates step up for him today, which is Alec Pierce, who is he's playing well, but he's a secondary weapon, and Jonathan Taylor, who they didn't use. Pittman needed to be that guy when he did get opportunities with 7 targets. And it's just, this isn't going to work with Richardson if this is how his top pieces are going to be used and perform for him.
Unsung villain of the game. That's right. We're just sticking with the bad. We're going to touch on the hero of the game real fast here before we get into other stuff. But unsung villain of the game. For me, this is the defensive ends. There was one.
How you just concentrated it all to the same area.
Yeah.
I'm going to do mine that way too. We'll just touch them all.
There was one really good series from Dio Dangbo. I don't want to miss that. But for the most part, the way teams have attacked the Colts so far is that they're just avoiding Grover Stewart. The Packers did mix in some runs up the middle. They didn't really work in the first half. I feel fairly confident.
Did you say mix in or mix in? Because I think you're giving some nightmares of the Colts when you say that name.
Well, just to underscore our point about how bad the run defense is. Do you know what Joe Mixon has in this Sunday night game that's on while we're recording this? He's 24 yards.
Okay.
He's 24. 24. It's 24 yards in like 2 carries last week. Anyway, Kwity Paye, Dio Odengbo, Tyquan Lewis, these are all big guys. They're supposed to be able to stop the run. Some of them, in Tyquan Lewis's place, are playing on first and second down to stop the run rather than playing Laiatu Latu. And they have gotten absolutely destroyed on the edges. I could have gone a lot of places with this. I could throw in the linebackers who have made, outside of the forced fumble, like 3 plays all season. I could go with the corners who I thought got blocked really, really poorly.
Mm-hmm.
Or got blocked really, really bad. Like, you couldn't get off of blocks today. I'm going to go with the defensive ends. Like, you have to set an edge. Like Kwity Paye was saying afterwards, we have to aggressively set an edge. Like they have in the past. Where is it? Like, if this run defense, especially with Buckner going down with what we're told his X-rays are negative, it's a sprained ankle. It could be a severe sprained ankle. Who knows how long he's out? He looked using lots of pain. Like, if Buckner, because Buckner couldn't play first and second down today, he was just playing third down. If Buckner's out for a considerable amount of time, why would anyone run at Grover Stewart? Just keep running around him. And the defensive ends have to be able to do something and haven't done anything yet in terms of outside of that one series by Dio. It's just really bad on the edges. So that's unsung villain of the game for me.
Yeah, I'm gonna follow the theme and kind of concentrate mine to an area. And like with you, there's other ways I could go. I could go at the tight ends, who, again, didn't see much out of them. And I could go at Anthony Richardson. I'm just bringing this up so it's not like I'm letting him off the hook, because his 2 picks were brutal. One, just a horrible overthrow, unnecessary. And the other one just threw it right at a linebacker running the route for Michael Pittman. The reason, though, I'm going to, again, my big thing with Anthony, though, he's young. And when he's in games when the Colts use him right and he makes mistakes, I'll make him the villain of the game. It's hard for me to do that if you don't let him run. You cannot, this is a little aside of Shane Steichen, you can't compare a guy as a runner to Steph Curry and not use him. I mean, that was his quote, was like, why would you not use his superpower? And then they didn't use it. So my actually unsung villain, to tie all this kind of together, is A.D. Mitchell. So A.D. Mitchell, had a tough first game, but it felt like it was mostly Anthony's issue. Certainly, could have scored 2 touchdowns. Maybe there's a little bit he could have cleaned up as far as the route running, but he got open like crazy and just didn't, the quarterback didn't give him the ball. Today was not that case. There was 4 targets. He did have 1 catch for 30 yards. So now he's up to 2 catches on the season. But today we had A.D. Mitchell with a brutal drop on third down, kind of like Pittman's, except he had basically bobbled it 3 times and didn't come down with it. That was another very lost situation. There was a play where they had a nice gain. Jonathan Taylor had a huge run, and it got called back because A.D. Mitchell was not lined up properly. That is the type of, that's worse than the drop to me, because, like with all young players, like you're new to the league, you're going to make some mistakes, but that felt like not being dialed in. And then there was a play late in the game when Anthony could have thrown a better ball. He was trying to sort of aim it and get this perfect pass. We just had to hit a wide open A.D. Mitchell down the sideline. But A.D. Mitchell's got to go up for that ball. Like, you cannot just, it's a little overthrown, so I'm just going to run out of bounds. Like, you've got to lay out just something. Just the focus level today for A.D. Mitchell, I just did not really like. He did own it well in the locker room, and he knows he's got to learn from this. And this is what young receivers go through sometimes. It's partly why we were trying to pump the brakes on A.D. Mitchell in training camp, where he's clearly a freakish athlete, got a great build, and by all accounts, mostly he's put in the work, he's asked a lot of questions, but it's not coming together for him right now between him and Richardson. But today felt like more of his issues with drops, lining up, not fighting for the ball. And that's what I'm getting at is they just needed someone other than Alec Pierce in the passing game to do anything for this quarterback. Even like Jonathan Taylor was not good, dropped twice in the passing game. The only person coming through for you had Richardson drop back 37 times, and I thought one target stepped up in a meaningful way, and that's Alec Pierce. And that cannot be the only thing we are talking up. So Pittman is the top villain for this category, this little offshoot category, but A.D. Mitchell I thought was right there because if they're going to rest Josh Downs, it sounded like he was pretty 50-50 and they just wanted to be safe. This has got to be an A.D. Mitchell game to at least be dialed in and even if it's lower volume, take care of the opportunities you get. And that was a tough showing.
2 catches and 9 targets so far this season.
Yeah.
2 catches and 9 targets. Okay, this should be quick. We've got a lot. We've gone really long on villains. This should be quick. Hero of the game, Nate. Who have you got for hero of the game?
The only person that I want to give this to is Jonathan Taylor. I thought Jonathan Taylor as a runner was phenomenal today. Absolutely fantastic. He got 12 carries, and he ripped them off for 103 yards. It was a variety of chunk gains. One of those got called back, the one I mentioned with A.D. Mitchell.
Probably his best run.
Probably his best run. So just on
two guys had him, and he just shucked them.
That's what's crazy is just on his low volume, he could have had close to 150 yards just on that alone. And it was even some of his like lower level runs were like last week where I thought he kind of set things up patiently and finished through contact. He did a great job of setting up his blocks and hitting that gear at the sideline. The passing game was not great for him, and it seems like that cost him late in the game, but he still should have gotten a lot more than 12 carries. And so Jonathan Taylor, to me, like this is how I thought this game. What I thought would happen in this game was after the Texans sold out so much to stop Jonathan Taylor last week, and they got him for so many explosive plays, I thought we would see the flip where the Packers guarded against explosive plays and Jonathan Taylor got going. That did happen. Colts just didn't use it as much as they should have. But this was the Jonathan Taylor that they need. Looked like an all-pro runner, and I just when you can only get 12 carries, you turn it into 103 yards. I think that's a pretty darn good day.
My hero of the game is Alec Pierce, 5 catches, 56 yards, and a touchdown. He had a 6th catch that was erased by Quentin Nelson holding. One of Anthony Richardson's better plays of the game. I think I put this way on social media. We talked about it a little bit after the game. If you had said that Alec Pierce is going to have 8 catches for 181 yards and 2 touchdowns through the first week, you would be thinking that's great because if he's doing that, then the other guys are doing great too. Well, unfortunately, he's been their most consistent weapon so far.
Mm-hmm.
That's not good. But Alec Pierce has been good. And with that, we will get off the hero of the game. No one wants to hear about that. We'll get to the number of the day. Do you have a number of the day, Nate? But there's so many. There are so many numbers.
Just since I've developed a little theme here, I'll leave the ones on your theme to you. I'm going to go with 12. It's the number of carries Jonathan Taylor had today to get 100 yards. This is his 17th career 100-yard game, and this is the fewest carries he's ever had to get to 100 yards. That's kind of crazy to me. Like that to me sums up the whole Shane Steichen thing is that you used him as little as possible for him to be as explosive as possible and scored 10 points. So 12, that number for rushes in a healthy game for Jonathan Taylor, I don't think we should see that again.
I'm actually going to jump onto yours here because what I normally do with number of the game is I kind of look through and I look for the number that shocks me the most. 7.8. Any guesses what 7.8 is?
Yards per attempt for Richardson.
Yards per rush for the Colts.
Oh, yeah.
7.8. Only 18 carries. I feel like that backs up your point.
Yeah.
That's a lot of yards per attempt.
And that even includes 2 carries for 0 yards out of Trey Sermon. So it's sort of like when we
Trey
talk about
Sermon had carries today?
well, there was that speed option. Don't know if you
No.
witnessed that. So yeah,
Okay,
that average between Taylor and Richardson was bananas.
Can we take the number of the day here to we'll take some number of the day time and talk about that option.
Yeah.
If you're going to run an option. I think there's more obvious reasons to be upset with this, but I'm gonna take it super football nerdy. If I'm running an option with the Colts and I have a pitch man, my number 1 option is Jonathan Taylor. My number 2 option is Tyler Goodson. My number 3 option is Anthony Gould. My number 4 option is probably Josh Downs if Josh Downs is healthy. And my number 5 option is Trey Sermon. Do you know why that is? Pitchman is supposed to be fast.
Yep.
Trey Sermon, I feel like was too close to Richardson. I'd have to watch it again. But on an option, the guy that forces the quarterback to pitch the ball should not be able to make the tackle on the running back. Nope.
And
nope. Not supposed to be able to happen. They're too close.
To your point, I watched a lot of Trey Sermon in his 1 year at Ohio State. I don't know that he's ever run the speed option in a game for that whole reason.
Well, that makes me feel like
and that's how it looked. Is a guy didn't look comfortable doing it. And the thing that just so much wrong with that play. That was the first play of the fourth quarter. They let a quarter change tell them to take out their running back. It wasn't actually about being in pass first settings because they weren't. They were running the ball there. It was also 3rd and 1. So if your idea is we're going to just run twice to get the first down because they were at the edge of Matt Gay's range when he's dealing with coming off the hernia surgery, don't run a play that could get blown up for 4 yards loss. That turned a 46-yard field goal into a 50-yarder. Whereas if they just even do a basic run that gets stuffed and it's 4th and 1, they probably go for it. At worst, though, it's 4 yards further up, closer for Matt Gay, who, they just put a kicker coming off hernia surgery in a tough spot to nail a 50-yarder outdoors on the road because they ran a pitch play to lose 4 yards. So that was tough.
Now we move into the supposed to be fun interlude, although Nate's going to sour it up a little bit.
Well, I would say that I'm not souring.
You have good reason. That's true. You're not the one souring it. The Colts did it.
Yeah.
We're going to go with game day observation. My game day observation, the Colts do not have this. So this is not very Colts-centric. It's not very Colts-friendly, just going to be honest. My favorite stadiums in the NFL to go to are the ones where you drive through a neighborhood and there's a stadium right there. Lambeau is like this. Buffalo is like this. Those are the two that stick out to me the most as being like this. It's awesome. Like on Nate and I's drive in, there were people parking cars for $50 in their lawn. There was a church that did its services we don't know this for sure. I don't want to say this is a report, but there's a church that I think does its services early enough so that it can open its parking lot and park cars for $20. There's incredible tailgates out there. There were $30 pee in park. That's my favorite sign. Park and pee. So not only can you park, you can also use the restroom in their house, probably to avoid seeing people pee on their lawn later in the game or later in the day. Anyway, it's just the best. To me, it's the best. Those tailgate scenes when it's in people's yards, and there's Packers fans who do it in the parking lots like they do at the Colts stuff too, but there's a lot of stuff in yards, in business parking lots. There's bars with people standing outside looking at the stadium. Like, it's just, when it feels like it's in the middle of a neighborhood and not in a downtown, it's just better. Maybe that's the school Wisconsin in me coming out, but it feels more collegey is what it feels like. It feels a lot more like going to LSU or Camp Randall in Wisconsin or, where we went to school, Mizzou. Like, there's a lot of places. Auburn is like this. It feels a lot more like that where you can walk through a neighborhood and pop out of the stadium.
Yeah, there's a part of me that I think there's a little Wisconsin in you because there's a part of me that does like when a stadium is in the vibrant heartbeat of the city. But what I'm going to kind of just play off yours a little bit because I'd never been to Lambeau. It's weird that I've covered 2 NFC North teams, but I wasn't really in traveling roles back then covering the Lions and Bears, so I never got to Lambeau. So it's been a bucket list for me for that, and then the fact that just growing up as a football fan. So definitely the warmest day I ever imagined. Tied for the second warmest day ever that they've had a game here. So that was different. But the thing
like that. Nope, don't like that.
No, I didn't love that. But
60 degrees.
To give people in Indianapolis kind of picture of what that drive-in and that neighborhood feel is like, because it's like Speedway for the Indy 500. Just everyday middle class normal homes that people live in year round, and then like when this thing is here, all of a sudden their home turns into like the festival zone, and they're parking cars in their front yard, and this is just sort of like the place to be. And it's like it just sums up what it's like to be in this community. And like Green Bay is like its own version of Speedway for a totally different sport, but something that to them is every bit as big as the Indy 500 is to the people at Speedway. So that was very fun to see.
Nate also got to experience the train of people coming up from Milwaukee. A lot of season ticket holders in the Milwaukee area that drive up on 41, and our hotel was in Appleton, so we were in that line for a little bit. Now we get to the part where we're tinkering these games that are so bad. We've decided we've had to tinker with some of these categories. I'm going to do 3 football things that gave me joy. Nate is going to do 3 football things that left him terribly vexed.
Yes.
I'll start out. Number 1, this is an easy one. Alec Pierce doing the Lambeau Leap. He grew up watching the Packers. Like, there's some people, old fuddy-duddies, would be like, well, you were losing. You shouldn't have done it. Go to hell. Like, he doesn't know when he's going to have another chance to do it. He is like, this is a really cool thing for him. He found a Colts person in the stands. That's going to be a memory for those Colts fans. The great thing about the Lambeau Leap is that it's a celebration where the player gets to interact with the fans. And so Alec Pierce doing the Lambeau Leap, that's great. Now time for Nate.
Very odd. It's just going to be like good cop, bad cop, ping pong.
The complete opposite way with 3 football things that left him terribly vexed and possibly in physical pain.
Yeah, well, I'll start conservative, the uninteresting and move the interesting. I'm just going to, for one of these, I'm going to double down on the speed option. And I'm going to leave the Colts out of this, except for the fact that they ran it. I don't like that. I don't like that play at the NFL level. That is a high school football play. That is our quarterback and running back are better athletes than anybody you have in your field, and we don't have a lot else to our offense type play. And look, I love this backfield. Well, if you use it, if you have Jonathan Taylor as the pitch man, I love it. I guess I am kind of getting into the Colts here, but the thing is, like, it's just so hard to run at this level. Like the closing speed of linebackers, defensive ends is so fast, and the risk of a negative play is so high. You could drop the ball could get swatted if it's not a good pitch, or just blown up to where you lose 4 yards like they did. Like I think it's like asking for disaster, and not in the way that some others do, flea flicker or something that's like there's a high payoff to it. I still think for the most part the payoff of this is very low. I will say at least they ran to the right side. I think like my two least favorite plays that you can call in football is the goal line fade and the speed option to the short side of the field. Those are the plays that need to be like thrown in the trash. So just my way of saying, like, don't do the speed option. Like let's kick that out of here. Give that to the high school football coaches here in Wisconsin to run, but not in the NFL.
Number 2 football thing that gave me joy. I'm a big fan of lining up in big personnel and throwing it to the tight end. Ollie Cox had a catch for 22 yards. You might not believe me because the Colts tight ends have, I think, 3 catches on the season. But yes, he did. He had 22 yards. Ollie Cox has an explosive play in the passing game, mainly because no one ever remembers to guard the blocking tight end. So second football thing that gave me joy. You can give me all of the all of the little pop passes to the tight end.
That was actually
also hated covering them when I was a high school linebacker. Hated it.
Yeah, that's like the opposite of the speed option. Is there's high payoff to that. It's hard for people to match up with it. So I like that as a football thing that gave me joy. As far as things that left me vexed, I'm going to go with the false start out of a timeout is one of those things I will never understand how that can happen on offense. The Colts did it out of the 2-minute warning on a 4th down, and it was Quentin Nelson, shocking to see that went down. Like, look, mistakes happen sometimes when you're on the road and it's loud and all that, but like the whole point of a timeout is to quiet the crowd and get the plan together. So that is something that's just, I think, emblematic of a very tough performance.
Number 3, football thing that gave me joy. I have long said privately, I haven't said it so much on the podcast, that true sports fandom is defined by hate more than love. Anyone can love a team, but to truly be a sports fan, you must hate. And we stopped off to get a little food after the game at a sports bar and golf establishment, indoor golf establishment, by the way.
Right there in Titletown.
Yeah, pretty cool. But the guy sitting behind us was cheering so vociferously for the Houston Texans that you would have thought he was a Texans fan. He is not a Texans fan. He is a Packers fan wearing a Packers jersey. He just hates the Bears that much. That is true sports fandom. You don't just want good things to happen to your team. You want bad things to happen to the other team.
It makes for a pretty full day. Like you go to the Packers game, you watch a win, you go over to the sports bar, the Bears are on, and you're just gonna release your remaining venom and adrenaline on them. So
I mean, he was cheering as hard for the Texans as he probably cheered for almost as hard for the Texans as he was cheering for the Packers that day.
Yeah, that was.
He was right behind me and Nate too, so we got like every oh come on, and upset with the refs.
Yes, I endorse that football thing that gave you joy. My last thing that left me terribly vexed is linebackers catching people. I don't like that. I don't like falling back into tackles like that. That happens way too much with this Colts linebacking core right now. That is supposed to be a group that lays the wood. And to me, it's not just the bad result of football play where it's, letting them fall forward for 2-3 yards beyond contact that over the course of time adds to that crazy rushing total. To me, it's more of like an attitude and pride thing where the more that they sense they're doing that to you, the more they're going to run at you. And sometimes when you have one of those hits that's the other way where they think they've got a lane and you just kind of drill them and drive them back, that's sort of your way of answering with your pads to say, we're not going to be pushed around. And that was what I wanted to see today, where I didn't think the Colts would solve every bit of their run defense issues in 1 week, especially when DeForest Buckner was as limited as he was. But what I wanted to see was those linebackers who seem fresh, who were experienced, who have been playing together, who the team's invested in. I wanted them to kind of be the guys who were the enforcers a little bit. And so there was just way too much of that where it felt like we'll make the tackle that kind of comes our way and falls into our lap. And that's just a basic football thing. That's where you let an opponent just kind of smell blood in the water, is when you are that kind of passive on defense, just in the physical element of the game. So didn't love that.
That's been the interlude. Usually it's supposed to be pretty fun. It was kind of fun, probably also kind of made you mad again. We now move into the last couple categories, too much blame and too little blame. We'll start with too much blame. I'm going to go with the offensive line for too much blame. Yeah, some bad penalties in there. To be sure. But also 7.8 yards per carry. Richardson was only sacked once and 34 dropbacks. I know he does some of that himself, but I thought for the most part, pretty solid. Pretty solid blocking. Could be wrong. Just feel like they got a little too much blame. Nate I terribly vexed Nate again because he's trying to figure out somebody for too much blame.
I am. It's tough, so I'm going to stretch this one a little bit, but I'm going to go with Matt Gay. Too much blame. Matt Gay, he made one field goal from 34 yards, very clean field goal attempt. Missed the other one from 50 yards, and certainly when you look at the numbers and you pair that together with what he did the preseason and the end of last season, he certainly looks like a kicker in a not very good place. And I'm not saying I know for sure he's in a good place. I think he's got to start proving some things. Now, I did write a story last week about kind of the health journey he's been on and how that played into last year's misses. And I just don't know that he's 1,000% over all of that right now. We talked about how just amazing it was that he's back from hernia surgery just a couple weeks after. But it was telling when last week they took that up to the game time, literally the morning of the game, to decide they weren't going to use Matt Gay. Like, they've played him when he's not been healthy. He wants to be out there. So in that sense, and he's said this too, like if he's choosing to be out there, he deserves the results. So he's going to wear this result, but it's still a 50-yard kick outdoors. And so I just think, like, you don't want to get too results-based with it where you just look at the fact that Matt Gay missed a kick. Matt Gay's missing kick. That's a 50-yard kick outdoors is hard. Again, you paid him to make more of those than he's not going to make. He does have to start making them, but he is coming off hernia surgery, and that just goes back to that speed option play where I just think they didn't have to set him up with a kick that hard. They didn't have to set up with a kick at all. They should have set up a fourth down attempt there. So just I don't know. If you have concerns about Matt Gay, that's fair. I don't think this game should really factor into it. Those concerns should just be what already was. And this game was like you kind of took a guy who's not fully recovered and put him in a spot where not a lot of kickers in that spot would make it.
Too little blame for me is going to be Anthony Richardson. I know I have this suspicion that Richardson, when he has time in the pocket, tries too hard to like place the ball. It's just a gut feel type thing. It kind of looks like he's trying to like, I don't know. It's almost like a hand motion thing where it looks like he's trying to like throw a dart almost. And it's like he's trying to like drop it in the right spot. And usually when he does that, it sails. He's got to be more accurate. Teams are going to do, especially after the way Alec Pierce went off in the first game, they're going to do what the Packers did today, and they're going to have a corner and a safety on him anytime he tries to go down the field. His receivers did not help him today. There were a lot of drops, but he's just got to get more accurate because the thing about those misses is as much as the pass to Pittman that got picked off was a really bad decision and concerning because we haven't seen a ton of that from him so far. We also haven't seen a ton of that from him so far. And I'm more concerned about those overthrows on plays over the middle, the accuracy issues. That stuff turns in interceptions a lot. When you have an open receiver coming across the middle, there's a safety behind who's not really in a position to make a play on the ball until you overthrow it. That's a problem. They've got to get that fixed. There's a part of me that kind of thinks he needs to just drive the ball, and Colts receivers just have to deal with some hot stuff coming out just for the sake of accuracy. I don't know for sure if that's the right thing. It's probably feet too. He's got to be more accurate than that. He's got to be more accurate than 17. He's at 49% through the first two games. It's got to get better. I think there's reasons for some of the way he's playing. He's young. It's his sixth start. I don't think it disqualifies him, but in this game specifically, he deserves he deserves more of the blame than I saw him getting. That I kind of feel like he's getting.
Yeah, I think he's getting a fair amount of blame. I wouldn't say it's too much or too little, but he deserves blame. Everything with the passing game deserves blame. What I noticed out of him is I do think feet are a big part of this, and that overthrow to Pierce. There was a blitz that Jonathan Taylor didn't pick up super well, and he's sort of drifting backward, which I still think he had time. Maybe I know they're trying to find any way to limit the hits. So I know that was probably a factor in it, but it felt like sometimes when his feet are a little bit off and he's stepping back, especially backwards, like obviously when he stepped to the side and he had an amazing throw to Pierce last Sunday worked. When he's stepping backwards, like he will sail it. It's almost like he steps back and then aims high. And it's like that same power that could work on a right trajectory, right to the receiver, that it comes in hot. That's kind of what you're suggesting. That all of a sudden becomes more of like loft that just goes over the head, and that missed sharply. I mean, Pierce is a heck of an athlete, a 6'3".
Yeah, he jumped really high,
and he couldn't get close to that ball. So that showed you it doesn't have to be perfect here. He's not going to be perfect, but you can't miss that much because that's when it turns into just a center field type pick for the safety. For me, too little blame. I'm going to go with the Colts cornerbacks because, we've kind of spread our blame around on the defense. They're in such a tough spot today, with Juju Brents being out, but that's the reality for the rest of the season. That's the way they built this room. It felt like they didn't get they weren't the talking point because of how much else went down. But still, like you mentioned this, I just thought they did a really bad job in run defense. Just these Packers receivers just blocked their tails off today. And that's a little bit of like, there's got to be a little more there. Like especially Jalen Jones, as he got driven up the field a lot. Like he's bigger than these guys he's going against. That's just like, you've got to win some of those. Like you're not, I know it's a hard job being a young corner and you're going to get beat on the occasional play that a guy makes with his quarterback. But like that's felt like something they could have controlled a little bit better and didn't. It's something I just think they've got to prove. Juju Brents, I think, is good at that. They don't have him out there. They've got to be better against the run. And then, just some other moments like, it was good coverage from Jalen Jones on the Romeo Doubs play, but like you got to find the football. We're running into that a little too much. That's where we see the inexperience is just sort of that poise and kind of feel at the catch point. Kenny Moore got kind of toasted by Wicks on the touchdown, which is the only touchdown pass that Malik Willis has thrown in 4 games. So that's significant. And Malik Willis,
or you could say it another way, it's the only touchdown pass he's thrown in 3 years.
Yeah, or that. And just the end of the day is like Malik Willis, they were protecting, they didn't have him throw much, but like 12 of 14, 122 yards, a touchdown, no turnovers, and a rating of 126.8. And it's like, it can't be that easy. Like I know they were setting him up. I know a lot of those passes, there were some screen passes and stuff, but when you do get those few opportunities where he's throwing at you and it's not a screen pass, like this is the guy you got to win against. You just have to win more than they won. And so they weren't like the reason they lost, but they weren't a positive either. And this team needed some positives to come from somewhere. And just, that was an area where this was their day to have a day. Like they're going to have other games that are much tougher than this. They'll get exposed, but they needed to like be able to make a play against Malik Willis in coverage today, and just didn't happen.
Yeah, that Jones play, I didn't like. I was very upset.
Yeah.
Like when he threw it, I thought, oh, that could be a pick.
Yeah, great position, but
and Jones now has an issue. Like this is the second week in a row that there's been some issues where he's in position to make a play and doesn't really react to the ball. It's a concern going forward, especially with Brent's out, especially going against teams that can throw the ball better than Malik Willis, teams that actually trust their quarterbacks to do 2-minute drills. We'll move on though. We're getting tiered to the end. The last two things we always close on: one to throw away and one to go on. We'll start with one to throw away. Nate, what do you got? This is something that we're talking about. People are talking about right now that's not going to be something going the rest of the way.
I'm going to keep it simple with these last two and just play off, just beat the drum that we've been beating with a couple categories here. So my one to throw away goes right at what I wrote after the game, which is I don't think we're going to see this from Shane Steichen again. And that's partly why I'm as hard as I am with him today, is that this needs to be a one-off. It is so out of character for how he managed Gardner Minshew, how he managed Jalen Hurts, Justin Herbert, like his entire career that earned him this job. Anthony Richardson last year, very different from that. Same thing with Jonathan Taylor. Like he prioritized the stars of his offenses. And I think with Jonathan Taylor, this is a little different because it's not like he's out here saying, feed me. But I think they'll have a reaction to it that's similar to when Michael Pittman wasn't being used early last year. And then they course corrected in the most obvious way. I think that's what we're going to get to with this, where Shane, he's going to go through the film and he's very solutions oriented. And he doesn't have the ego to think like everything I do is the right thing just because I did it, which is what some coaches do. I do think he's going to look back at this and realize like this was a bad game for him. And he's got to not do it this way. He can't have Anthony drop back this many times. He can't ignore his legs this way. He can't have Jonathan Taylor off the field. This was a bad game for Shane, but it's one bad game out of enough that he's coached so far here and called plays for with the Chargers and the Eagles that feels so out of character that I think we're going to see a course correction the hardest way. We have to because Anthony Richardson's not going to develop as a passer if this is the way they're going to use him. But I think Shane knows that, and he'll get back to the things they planned on. Like I know this past offseason he was super, super pumped to have Richardson and Taylor in the backfield and what that rushing threat would do. At the end of the day, I think he just thought he was so excited about the explosive plays they hit last week. He wanted to hit just a couple of those to get a lead, even a tie game, and then he thought they could they could just ride the running game down the stretch. When they fell down, it didn't work. He kind of got in his own head. He overthought this. So I think going forward, he's going to realize, like, when you have Taylor and Richardson and they can run the way they are, and especially when you're going up against a team that's struggling to pass the ball like the Packers are going to, I don't think he's going to overthink it this way again. So I think we'll look back and say this was Shane's kind of one bad game learning moment that he moved on from.
My one to throw away what I said last week about the run defense. Last week I said that I didn't think the run defense would be that bad. The whole season, I got nothing. I got no reason after watching today's game to convince you otherwise. I'm going to blame, if they're good against the run now for the next couple of weeks, I'm going to blame the offensive coordinator for the other team.
That's hilarious.
Based on what we've seen. So that's what you should throw away. Throw away what I said last week about the run defense, because if Buckner's out, that does not help. Makes it easier to avoid Grover. Yeah,
I agree.
They're so much worse than any other team in the NFL.
Oh, yeah. Like 80 yards, I think I saw.
So that's 40 yards per week.
What have they allowed so far? 470?
474 yards.
Yeah, think about that. In today's era of the NFL.
239 yards per game rushing in the year of our Lord 2024, not the year of our Lord 1964. This was not the Paul Horning Packers running the sweep. There's not Jim Taylor. None of those guys were around. They were not pulling guards. This is a Packers team that has been pass oriented now, not today, but pass oriented now for going on 30 years of football.
That's exactly what the Texans
33 years of football. That's what the Texans are too, and they've now given up so many yards. Plus, the other thing here is, let me look this up again. Since this game is almost over that we're watching, we've been talking about how bad the Colts were now for long enough that this game's almost over. The Texans have, against Matt Eberflus's Bears, 76 yards on 21 carries. We used to talk a lot when Matt Eberflus was here, but I would pay too much attention to the run. You could convince me that he didn't pay enough attention, that the Colts aren't paying enough attention to the run. anymore, and maybe it's something that you should lock down. So, yeah, throw away what I said. Right in the trash. Poof. I have regrets. That brings us to one to go on. One to go on. Nate, what's your thing that we're talking about today that we're going to be talking about the rest of the season?
So I'm going to play off that and say this run defense is bad. It's going to stay bad. And the main reason it's going to stay bad, at least in the interim, is what's going on with DeForest Buckner. Very concerning to see him go down with the ankle. And we've seen Buck before have deal with injuries. He is so good at and consistent at shaking those off. Today was a very different vibe where he was down on the field for a while. When he got over to the sideline, he was sitting there with his shoe off, cannot put weight on it at any point. He sat there a while too, trying to get feeling back in it, head in his hands, had to be helped, carted off. Didn't come to get his things after the game in the locker room. Concerning. And so to me, I mean, Buckner is one of the best ever at bouncing back. So I'm not ruling anything out for him. I'm not putting a timetable on him. But what I am saying is that we now have a player who's dealing with a back and an ankle injury. And when he was dealing with the back in this game, he wasn't playing rundowns. They were saving him for the pass downs. And that was a big part of the problem. And so I struggle to think that if he's managing the back and the ankle, is going to be a big rundown player, unless they just want to force the issue, and that starts to get pretty dangerous. So I just think when you have this defense right now that doesn't have DeForest Buckner out there, and it's anybody else in that spot, especially when it's Taven Bryan, but even if it's Raekwon Davis or Adetomiwa Adebawore or however they want to do it, next to Grover Stewart, teams are going to do what you mentioned, which is run away from Grover Stewart. You can't run away from both of them, especially with as fast as Buckner is. He has like the speed of most defensive ends chasing these guys and dictating where they're going to go. Grover Stewart he destroys guards, but like if you run wide, you can run away from that one guy. And right now the edges are so problematic, and I think some parts of that will get better. Maybe they play Dayo Dangbo more than I think they've overextended Tyquan Lewis a little bit, where he's better early and then falls off a little bit. There's a little they can do there. They'll obviously emphasize that they have to, but like Kwity Paye dropped, 8 pounds to become more of that pass rusher. He can definitely do this better because just technique wise and focus, and he did it last year at such a high level, but he's intentionally transitioned his body to be more of a pass rusher. That's what they wanted, and that's what they've trained the entire room to be. Laiatu Latu is certainly wired that way, and he's dealing with an injury as well, so we'll see when he's out there. But I don't know that the edge play is going to completely transform. If Buckner's not out there, I mean, it's going to come down to Raekwon Davis just being the player that they signed him to be that we haven't seen yet. And maybe that happens. Clearly they liked him for that to sign him. We just so little impact out there. And for now, we just have to accept that they want to play a lot of defensive linemen. They want to rotate them. And one of those guys they want to play a lot and even start sometimes is Taven Bryan. So they have to prove to me that they're going to change the approach before I'm going to believe that it's different. There's some parts that are going to be better. I still believe these linebackers have to be better than this, especially Zaire Franklin. We have seen too much of it for him to just not be an impact run defender. But I just think they're right now going to pin this whole group on Grover Stewart and Zaire Franklin. And when teams want to run to the edge, I don't know that that's enough of an answer. So I think this is going to continue to be a struggle, which is a little concerning overall for the defense, given what they're also dealing with in the secondary.
I know it feels like the right answer if Buckner has to miss extended time is just to make Dayo Dangbo the 3 technique. But on the flip side, if you make Dayo Dangbo the 3 technique, then he's not playing to the end. They've been bad at end. So
they don't have 2 edge setting ends who can play high levels of snaps right now.
So
without him,
that seems bad. My one to go on. We're not going to stop talking about Gus Bradley.
Yeah,
it's going to be a conversation all season. The way it started, where the conversation was last year, we're going to be talking about Gus Bradley all season. The injury information for him has already gone terribly. No one is going to give him a pass for that, nor should they. We're going to talk about a lot about Gus Bradley, whether or not they should have kept him. I asked Shane if he still had confidence in Gus to fix the defense. He said absolutely 100%. Yeah, we're going to be talking about Gus Bradley, and we were already talking about Chris Ballard, but Gus Bradley is the one to think about. That is the end of the Colts Cover-2 podcast. We are finished with the Sunday Night Football game. The Bears are now 1-1. They lost the Houston Texans 19-13. There was a lot of sacking going on when I looked up in this game. The Bears, incidentally, we'll end this podcast by bringing it all full circle. The Bears, incidentally, rushed 17 times with running backs for 27 yards. And I have very good news for the Chicago Bears. The Indianapolis Colts are next. That's the First Impressions podcast. I'm Joel A. Erickson. This has been Nate Atkins. We're sorry we didn't make you feel any better about what happened on Sunday.